Imagine a place where the familiar becomes a nightmare. A school hallway, a gym class, the ordinary backdrop of a teenager's life. Kendrick Johnson, 17, vanished within those walls, only to be found in a way that defies all reason, rolled up in a gym mat. His death a puzzle no one can quite solve. But the true horror isn't just the how. It's the whispers, the shadows, the details that just don't quite add up. Missing pieces, conflicting stories, and a sense that something else might have happened here. Welcome back to Macabre Mondays, where mystery meets the macabre with your favorite deadly duo. I'm Ale.
And I'm Tom.
Your guides through the strange, the sinister, and the spooky. Today, we're heading to Valdosta, Georgia.
Ooh.
Yeah, which is close to the border of Florida, right off 75. Oh, you've heard of it?
Yeah, my mom, so funny enough, when my mom and I actually first moved to Florida, that was the place that we stopped in, and we stayed in a hotel there overnight.
What?
And we actually ate at the Hooters at that exit.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what a small world, because that's where we're going to be in today.
At the Hooters?
No.
Okay.
I know you love their wings.
Their wings are to die for.
I know. No, today we're going to be talking about the story of Kendrick Johnson. Have you ever heard of his name?
I have not.
Never?
No.
Ever?
No.
Ever?
No.
Well, on January 10th of 2013, it was a day that started like any other school day at Lowndes High School. Kendrick Johnson was a 17-year-old student. He was there attending his classes. He was a sophomore, a typical teenager. He loved sports, particularly football and basketball. He was known as a friendly, athletic kid, very easygoing, great student, bright, happy, smiling energy of his family. He was described as outgoing and positive, right?
Okay.
Now, on this particular day, he had reported to his classes as usual. But after his fourth period gym class, he was like nowhere to be found, kind of vanished, okay?
Okay.
When Kendrick didn't come home that afternoon after school, his family naturally got worried. They called the bus driver and they said, no, he didn't ride the bus that day home. So maybe, maybe just
cut school
or like skip class or something. His parents called his sister, Kenyatta, to see if maybe he called her, but nope, not a word from Kendrick. And they thought, maybe he was at a basketball game, but they checked and there wasn't any that day. So they started searching for him on their own, like back at school, around town. They're like driving around. They're asking students, teachers, school staff, friends. People are looking for him, and no one could really find him anywhere. So they contacted the police to report him missing. After like a couple hours, they're like, okay, this is weird. So not like him. And the sheriff who came to their home suggested that maybe he was probably with a girl or something.
I feel like that is the most common thing.
I know.
Is the minute a high schooler goes missing, or even like late middle schooler goes missing.
Anyone under 18. Yeah.
If it's within just a couple hours, they probably ran off with some girl.
Right. Or like they're probably with friends, or they didn't want you to know.
Like it's always so downplayed.
I know. And a part of me, I understand it to an extent, but I also feel like if this family...
You know your child the best.
Right. And if this family has no idea... Like they wouldn't be calling if they didn't see that this was an issue.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%.
So to me, and this is also 2013. Like I know phones were definitely a thing then, but to know how we have tracking stuff now, like on our phones to find my friends, it's not the same.
No,
it's not the same.
Like you gotta think 2013, that was, what was that? That was like the iPhone 4.
Yeah. No, but that's what I mean. Yeah. Like there wasn't everything. You'd have to have like Life 360, and not everybody was into that. It wasn't very well known. Exactly. So clearly his family stated that would be absolutely ludicrous because they know their son and their kids weren't the type to just up and disappear, not show up after a curfew, or not even let anybody know, which totally get that. But by the end of the day, he was still nowhere to be found. It was like he just disappeared into thin air. But by midnight of that day, with still no word from Kendrick, his mom and dad just had this terrible gut feeling that something was wrong. And they actually stated that they felt so strongly that he might end up dead somewhere.
Really?
Yes. And so the next day, on January 11th, the search continued. His family goes back to the high school to get some more answers, and that's where everything changed for them. Kendrick's body was discovered inside a rolled up gym mat in the school's old gym. Some of the students were grabbing the mats for gym class or practice or whatever.
Those are wrestling mats.
Yep, and that's when they discovered Kendrick dead inside the rolled up mat. Now, can you imagine the horror?
What the hell?
I know. The kids were in sheer shock. Imagine discovering this body. You're like in class. You're about to... I can't even imagine. And the photos are just so eerie because you can see his feet sticking out. Like, it's just so eerie. It's so sad.
And those mats are also not the lightest. Like, the foam ones are a little lighter than the other ones, but that's also not that light. And typically when you roll it up,
they're tight.
Like, that to me tells me that he was killed and then rolled into the mat.
Okay, interesting that you said that, because when I first look at it, I'm like, what the hell? Like, what? This doesn't look intentional. I mean, this looks intentional, right? Okay, so now clearly this is going to change and haunt the community forever.
Oh, 100%.
But while all this was happening, kids were still changing periods. Everything was still going on as normal.
What?
Yeah, as if the school wasn't a whole crime scene at that point. Because if you think about it, the minute you discover this body, that's it. Lockdown. Everybody needs to get out of the.
100%.
Exactly. So the Johnsons stated that the sheriffs that were on call that day seemed a bit insensitive towards them, discovering that their son and brother were dead. Right.
Of course.
And so when they got there, remember how I said that they went back to the school the next day to kind of look for that? When they got there, that's when they heard it, like, on the phone in passing or whatnot, once they got into the school. Yeah. And, like, his mom, there's a Tubi documentary. I mean, at this point, Tubi, you should just sponsor us because you've got some great free content and it's really, really amazing stuff. But in the documentary, the Johnsons are actually on the documentary, like, interviewing with the rector and stuff, and they're stating how his mom was obviously screaming from despair that oh my god, her son's missing, and all this stuff. And they didn't even let his mom go up to see his body or get close. They kind of had to stop her at the gymnasium door. But imagine a gym, that's huge, right? And so he's at, like, this far corner, and she's probably at the she's at the other entrance. Yeah. And so, but they actually let his sister take a look at a shoe of his for them to, I guess, like, half-assly identify. Yeah, half-assly confirm that it was him. And 15 minutes later, they pretty much told his family, like, oh, there doesn't appear to be any foul play, so it was most likely an accident.
I'm sorry, what?
I know. No. Imagine how shocking. First off, imagine how shocking all these instances are in this moment.
100%. The only other thing that I can say, as a former wrestler, we used to slide into these mats because, as you can see, they're always sitting upright,
right,
with that little, like, rope pull thing,
like belt on them. Yeah.
And so we did used to climb on top of them, and we would, like, slide inside, but you would always, like, pull yourself out. Yeah. But you never did it alone. And so, and on top of it, the way that this one specifically is sitting, to me, screams foul play because it, like, either he would have had to go in head first, or he got rolled up in it. Like, they're very tight.
I was going to say, and by the way, everybody, of course, everything will be on the socials. There's going to be a lot of heavy photos, but if you want to see those sides of the photos, that we're talking autopsies, all that, you can definitely head up to our website because we'll have it there. I don't think Instagram's going to be very friendly about, and TikTok too is going to be very friendly about some of the photos that are a part of this crime scene, but in a part of this case. But yes, exactly what you're saying, because the mats in this gym, they look more like how mats are today, where they're just a little bit more flexible. This one seems like, no joke, like rock solid, like there's edges, but again, I don't know what a wrestling mat is.
That's actually the new ones.
Okay, so never mind that. Forget it.
The old ones, next time we go to Greenwood, if we have a chance to go, I'll show you the old ones where two or three big pieces of basically foam and like leather material.
Never mind. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay, cool. Now, the crime scene where he was found was in the corner of this huge gymnasium, right? That's where they would keep all the rolled up mats standing upright.
Storage.
Right, exactly. And in the photos of the crime scene that I'm showing you, you can see it's all just a bunch of tall 6-foot mats. And the only things we can really make out of are feet in the middle of one of the mats with a pair of white shoes in the hole by his feet, right?
Yeah.
And then we also see a single black shoe with a white stripe laying on the floor on the side of another mat that seems very far away. You see that shoe? So he's found in that mat that's laying vertically there. And then that shoe is all the way on that left side.
This is another weird thing.
Okay.
So one, you see the mats that are laying down. See how small that hole is?
Yeah.
That is typically, if you roll the mat properly, that's how small the hole should be.
Right.
On top of it, as you can see, if you're looking, it seems like the interior, so the actual face up side of the mat is that like bluish, whatever color they use. If you look at the one that he's inside, it looks like that's inverted. In other words, they rolled it with the part that's on the ground.
I see what you're saying. Inside out. Oh, that is actually true.
Which is also why it makes it to where that hole is big, because as you can see, when you roll it the proper way, it's meant to be rolled that way.
It's meant to be rolled with the yellow outside, and then
because it's cut on one side.
That makes sense. Yeah. So but again, you know what? That's a good thing to note too. And with you saying that, it also makes me think. I mean, kids, high school, they might not roll. Maybe they may not roll one up. I agree with what you're saying. Trust me.
We were always told how to roll.
No, I agree with what you're saying. Completely agree with what you're saying. Because to me, that is, I didn't notice that when I was covering and researching.
One.
Right. It is the only one, which is really odd. Yes. And that's why it's good to know. That's a part of me is like, oh, well, maybe is it like one lazy bum that's like, whatever, it, I'm just gonna.
No, because if anything, that makes it 10 times harder to roll that damn mat.
To roll it? Oh, that's 100%. Good to know. Okay,
that's
good to know.
I'm not even joking.
Okay. Well, and I love that. I love your.
This is why I'm on the podcast. This is the only reason. I have random facts. Are you happy
that you got the job?
Yes. It took me a lot of interviewing. I mean, I interviewed once, got told no, and then came around the second time and was able to get in.
Hey, listen, second chances, man. They happen to everybody. Now, the immediate question, of course, is how, right? That was your first question, too.
100%. Yeah.
You're like, what? How did this young man end up inside of a gym mat that is 6 feet tall? And get this, he's only 5'10". Not even only, he is 5'10". So we're talking a couple inches away from 6, right? Which is what, like 2 inches from 6? Yeah. What?
Yes.
I don't know how to do math. I'm like, what is that, like 2,
There's 12
3?
inches in a foot.
I know, I figured it out when I immediately started thinking of a subway foot long. I'm like, okay, what we got?
I love that. That's your unit of measurement. A subway foot long. They're not even a foot long.
Okay. That'll be for another time. But again, right? Like, how is it that this young man ends up inside of a gym mat that was 6 feet tall and he is 5'10"? And if he was that tall and it was such a tight space, right? How would he have even gotten out of it?
Well, again, and that's the whole thing. When we would mess around and we'd go into mats that we had rolled looser to where we could slide in, typically if we were doing that, we'd have our arms out.
Yeah. Right. That's true.
So,
And so now I have to mention that students at the high school state that it was kind of common for them, like just students in general, to leave their shoes or personal belongings inside the holes of those mats to kind of avoid paying for a locker, right? Because it seems like that seems to be a thing there.
Interesting.
And that in order to retrieve them, and since the mats were, light enough, they would be able to like push them, tilt them over to grab their shoes or belongings from the bottom instead of jumping or, leaning in to grab them. Because again, these are tall. We're talking 6
Well, they are
6 feet. Yeah, these are tall. And so it was also stated that Kendrick shared a pair of shoes with another classmate. So makes sense maybe why their shoes there, right? Like it's just kind of interesting, right? But just
I mean, that whole situation's completely...
This whole situation is strange already.
That's a little bit of a different thing, and I feel like that's a little interesting, to be completely honest.
Oh, I'm glad you find that interesting.
I have a feeling I'm going to find a lot of things interesting
in
this
might.
Episode.
And you might also be wondering, okay, all right, so they find this kid, they find Kendrick rolled up in a mat. What about cameras at the school, right? Because at this point in time... we know that he was last seen around 12:20 p.m. in the gym that day. Okay, so we're talking midday, leaning towards almost the end of the day, like the half of the end of the day. Well, the initial investigation by the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office concluded that Kendrick's death was accidental, that he was found upside down, vertical, his jeans were unzipped, and his front pockets were partially pulled out. But they theorized that he had climbed up on the mats. He entered the rolled up mat to retrieve his shoes and became trapped, that he couldn't breathe and ended up suffocating.
So you're telling me the mat unbuttoned his pants, unzipped them, pulled his pockets out. Mm-hmm. So the mat just basically mugged his
I don't know. Yeah, and he went in to retrieve his shoes because there are shoes. There's a shoe that they end up finding in there by the base of his head, which is the other shoe of that black shoe that's laying outside. Okay, I'm glad that you're gathering what I'm putting down. So the cause of death was ruled as positional asphyxiation.
Of course, because he was face down. Of course. Right. Oh, he got stuck. Oh, my God.
So and this is like an immediate thing, right? They're like, oh, this is probably an accident. So police stated that it was plausible if he stretched his arms that he could potentially squeeze into the hole. And with the students' accounts of utilizing the mats as a locker space for personal belongings, that, it was possible.
Yeah.
It was plausible, apparently.
These mats are also really light. And based off of the students, if they're using them like that, you would have just tilted over. He could have done it himself. We used to carry these mats by individuals. Well, right. I weighed 100 pounds when I was wrestling, and I'd carry a mat upstairs myself.
Right, and that's why I stated before that a lot of the students, they were like, well, yeah, that's normal. Like, we throw stuff in there, but we usually just like tilt it over and then grab it, because that also is the most efficient way to grab that. So I'm going to break down right now what we know thus far, okay?
Hit me.
Now, Kendrick was found in the gym upside down in the rolled up gym mats at approximately around 10:30 a.m. the next day on the 11th, right? So the next day after he was reported missing.
10 hours.
Okay.
No. Jesus, my math is off. 22 hours.
Subway footlong. All right, so that's what we know. 1. 2, cameras at the high school show the day before that he was last seen at approximately 12:20 p.m. in the gym. Okay. 3, we know that Kendrick is 5 feet 10 inches and the gym mats are 6 feet tall.
6 foot.
4, his shoulders measure 19 inches. And the police incident report states that the opening of the mat is 14 inches.
Foul play wasn't involved, but the mat's rolled the opposite direction that it typically is, and the mat is actually more tightly rolled than his shoulders are with.
Right.
Because that makes sense when it's accidental.
That's why they were saying, like, oh, if he were to like really like stretch in or something, like if he were to stretch his arms, he could probably fit through there. But again, we'll get into it. Now, last, so far what we know of, the sheriff's office states that based on student reports and his positioning, it was ruled a tragic accident, that he was just stuck trying to grab his shoe that fell through the hole of the mat, and that's how he died. That it was just a tragic freak accident. Now, when they found his body, they found vomit and a pool of blood at the end of Kendrick's head, at the end of the mat. But the shoe that he was trying to retrieve was laying directly under his head, okay? And although it was right under his head, and we're talking about a small area at this point, right? Because he's 14 inches in there. I mean, there's a 14-inch gap.
Yeah.
There was no blood or vomit found on the shoe. And because of this, obviously, you would think that there would be some type of blood or vomit on the shoe.
100%.
Especially looking at the photos.
At the photos and the angle he was at.
Right. But almost immediately, Kendrick's family and supporters questioned this conclusion because there seemed to clearly be some things that just weren't making any sense. I mean, the minute I was telling you the beginning of all this, you couldn't even understand. You're like, this just doesn't make sense,
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
At all.
And they felt that something was just deeply wrong with the official story. And again, they were already feeling like it's a whatever thing. Like, oh, it was just an accident. There's no foul play. It's not a big deal. Like, oh, sorry about your loss. Yeah. Let's move forward, right? So the Johnsons held a rally outside the courthouse downtown to gain support and get the word out about their son Kendrick and what was happening. They had a lot of families and supporters join that the news was even there to cover the story. So they're trying to get national attention at this point.
I would too.
Yeah.
I mean,
because no one's listening.
It's clear that this is foul play.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's odd.
Also, what's on his arm?
Oh, his headphones. Those are headphones that he had. Okay. He had headphones in his hand, and so that's what you're gonna see. Like, that's what you see. Yeah.
Okay.
And you got to think about it. This is 2013, so we didn't have AirPods yet. Yeah.
We were still rocking the
right. Exactly. The Johnsons went on national TV to demand that their son's body, Kendrick, should not leave the county until he was identified positively by his mom or dad, because at this point they still haven't even confirmed that it was him.
Yeah.
The only thing that they've seen thus far is a body from far away, because when they showed up at the school, they couldn't really go past the gymnasium door.
Yeah.
So they had it like blocked off, and they didn't let mom or any family member go over to identify that it was him. All his sister saw was a shoe that they brought over to her to look at. And of course, while showing family personal belongings of a victim is a non-scientific way to identify a body, like, looking at tattoos or birthmarks or clothes or jewelry that they have on, in this instance, no joke, they were right there. Like, why not just let mom or sister go and confirm that it's her?
They're already dealing with the tragedy.
Exactly. And while that's also okay too, because I also want to make it prevalent that it's easy for people to say, they should have done this or the cops should have done that. But I always try to keep in mind too that there's never really... We're not in
that position.
Right. We're not in that position, and there's never really a, quote unquote, perfect case. But it's still just interesting that they didn't let a family member who has a missing son that they just reported the day before, who goes to the same school, who has the same description as the body that was found on the gym mats, to go over and just visually positively identify that it was their son. Yeah. Right.
The other thing, before we continue going, and maybe you're going to mention this later, these are the two shoes that were found, right?
No, we're going to mention this later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
We're going to mention that later.
Moving on.
So that's the black shoe with the white stripe. That's the shoe that he was... They're theorizing that he went in to try to retrieve. Okay.
The white shoe is what he was wearing.
Which white shoe?
That one.
We'll get into that. Okay. So this is just the start of what's going on. That just obviously is going to make you question some more stuff, clearly, as I'm painting the picture more for you in this episode. So back to the story. Mr. Johnson and the family haven't gotten the chance to identify the body yet. And after the rally, of course, with national news and all that, he gets a call shortly to come down to the crime lab and identify the body of his son.
Oh, would you look at that?
They're like, you know what? Now we're kind of in a little rush. But again, just what a coincidence how that worked out. When Mr. Johnson was presented the body of his son, his initial reaction to seeing his son in the condition he was in, which let me state too that his mom and sister were at the school. His dad was actually working, and he was driving trucks.
Okay.
So he wasn't able to be there.
Be there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So although he is going to be identifying his son post-mortem, his immediate thought the minute that he looked at him was that he was in a brutal fight.
Oh my God.
Yes.
I'm sorry, there's not a chance in hell that there's not foul play involved.
Right. Especially looking at the post-mortem photos, it's insane because... he was Mr. Johnson when he identified his son, his family, they were in disbelief because it didn't look just like a freak accident. He even stated in the documentary that he's his right side of his face
It looks like he got
swollen.
Bashed.
Yeah, like he got bashed. So his mother and family started to protest for justice for their son, their brother, their cousin. They started camping out in downtown. They started doing rallies, peaceful protests. People came to show support and join the protest to get more answers from the police, because at this point it just seemed like they were like, well, it was an accident. There's nothing more to it. And they were like, there's definitely more to the story that we're being told.
And even the thing is, even if you look at his lips, right here and here, you can see there's like additional swelling, and you can see that's not how a normal lip looks.
Right. No, and the thing is, like, we also have to keep in mind is this is post-mortem. Yes, and he was upside down, so I'm sure a lot of it has to do with some forensic.
I'm sure, too.
Yeah.
But
no, but I get what you're saying. Yeah. Like, this just doesn't look like the same.
And then you even look here. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just, you can tell that he was beat to hell.
Yeah, like exactly.
That's not, oh, I slid in and hit my head on the gym floor, or I scraped my face against the mat as I was going through it. No, that's violent.
And so at this point, the Johnsons were convinced that there was a cover-up. They, no joke, were protesting for days and days on end, weeks. They would walk 17 miles a day to, signify the 17 years that Kendrick was alive. Like, they wanted justice. They were like, something weird is going on, and we need to know what it is now.
They should.
And that leads me to the next point I'm going to make, because racism runs deep, since Valdosta is considered the Deep South, and clearly there's all those deep roots that are already unfortunately ingrained in some people still and have carried over from generation to generation. As I was watching this documentary on Tubi, it's, by the way, please everybody go check it out. It's free. It's by the filmmaker Jason Pollock, which I'm sure we've all heard of him. He directed it. It was so well done. It's called Finding Kendrick Johnson. It's a very so educational too. Like it's amazing. Please go check it out. I highly recommend it. But they go into such an informational deep dive too about the history of racism and how disgusting and horrible the acts were done because of racists, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of that racism, this is just how bad things were, and I'm sure could still be in the Deep South. And I need to place a trigger warning, but Valdosta, Georgia, is known for one of the most heinous acts of lynching in history. Okay?
Really?
In the early 1900s, Mary Turner, have you ever heard of her? She sounds vaguely familiar, yes. She was 21 and she was 8 months pregnant when her husband was lynched and murdered for being black. She was outraged and spoke out against it. And because of that, an angry racist mob, trigger warning, okay, what I'm about to say is very brutal. They tracked her down, tied her up, cut her stomach open, ripped her baby out, and stomped on her baby's head. And then they lynched her.
Jesus.
So that just kind of painted the picture of kind of the history there, right? Not saying that that's all Valdosta or Georgia in general is all about, or the South is all about, but it's one of the ugly history, like just the ugly, tainted pieces of history that we have from there. So Georgia clearly has a very dark history and a sad history to it, and that's just barely touching the surface. And I'm sure there's still some type of racism, there. I mean, there's racism everywhere in this country to this day, but in the Deep South, it usually lives there more from what we've seen. And it really just makes you think about things differently and how things kind of play out, right? And although Black Americans make up more than 50% of Valdosta, political power, of course, always will play a bigger role.
100%.
Right. Now I'm going to break down the findings of the case and just kind of get into the details of the crime scene. And I'm going to answer a lot of the questions that you're probably having.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a lot of events that took place from the sheriff department's investigation that are just very important for me to mention about this case overall.
Okay.
So get ready. We're going to jump into first piece of evidence that we're going to be talking about, okay? Now, Coroner Bill Watson stated in an interview, so he is the state coroner, okay? He stated in an interview that he was not notified of the discovery of Kendrick Johnson's body until approximately 5 hours after it was found. Now, this delay contradicts Georgia's law, which mandates immediate notification of a coroner in such cases where there is a dead body.
Really?
Yes.
I actually didn't even know that was like a...
Yeah, some states
I assume that there was like a process for that, but I didn't know that there's like a law with that.
Right.
That's interesting.
A lot of states do have that because if you think about it, if there's a dead body, the first person you should be calling... The faster you can get
somebody to actually investigate.
And here we're talking about a school. So imagine like hundreds of kids are walking in and out. We don't know what's going on. You know, like there's just a lot to cover.
To this day, as if I've known about this for days. To this minute, I am still in shock that they didn't put the school on lockdown.
I know. Or like been like, hey, everybody, letting out soon. This is so sad. Yada, yada, this stuff. Yeah. So Watson expresses concerns that the crime scene was clearly, probably, most likely compromised, like we said. And he noted that the body had actually been moved and that the mat had been unrolled and then re-rolled. So that's probably why, I know your face is like so shocked right now, which clearly would disturb evidence of a crime scene. So it seems like they unrolled Kendrick and then rolled him back up.
Why?
I don't know. They
and who?
The crime scene investigators that were there. There's not, which I know. Why would they do that? Again, you don't report it for 5 hours and then you go upon by touching the crime scene and just...
Like literally moving, doing exactly what... If you're a crime scene investigator, that's exactly what you're trained not to do.
And a part of me, it was like, okay, let me try to think of it. Okay, they show up, they find a dead body rolled up in a mat. Very weird, very odd. Okay, you're going to have to call the paramedics, right? Is he actually dead? Does he need assistance? Regardless, you have to call the paramedics, right? And then I'm like, okay, they get there, but I don't see how, if you know he's dead, even though to me, it sounds like they got there and they're like, oh, this looks like it was just an accident. And they were like, that's it. It's just simple as that. It was an accident. It was, we shouldn't think any more of it, which is also red flag. That's not good.
Sorry. A dead body anywhere in certain areas can understand when it's kind of passed off as like,
where it looks like a valid accident. Yeah. Yes.
You're talking a school inside of a mat. I'm sorry, but to me, that is clearly, how can I hide this? And
it just, to me, when I first look at it, I'm like, this doesn't feel like it's just an accident.
And from the sound of how they talk about the cameras spotted him last going into the gym at this time, that then tells me another side of it.
Right.
In the sense of there's not cameras in the gym. So then did the person, not saying that somebody did this, but to me, that's everything's pointing to somebody did this.
Right, like there's something more to the story.
Did they know that there were cameras outside of there and there's no other exit out of this gym to where, hey, if we go any other way, we're going to be seen.
Right, no,
so
definitely.
Let's just roll them up in the mat.
Right, no, I agree. Now, there's actually an email from the coroner where he requested that the interview he gave to the media, because he's on the news and he's talking about it, right?
Yeah.
That the interview he gave to the media be removed and destroyed. And he says in this email, I would appreciate it if you would destroy this interview with me. I do not want this to be shown whatsoever. I feel that our situation should not be aired. Which is interesting because odd. Why? That's so odd. And clearly you can imagine that that would raise eyebrows.
Weird.
Yeah, like what do you mean? Like, what do you mean this situation should be aired?
Yeah.
Odd.
Can we just retract everything that I just said?
Yeah. No, seriously. That's one of our key points that we're going to be talking about, okay? Moving on to our second key point of key pieces of evidence. At the crime scene, there were reported 3 pairs of sneakers that were found. One pair.
Now we can get into this white tennis shoe that I saw, because the minute I saw it, I said, that's not the same shoe.
Oh, thank you very much. I agree. So there's 3 pairs of sneakers that are found at the scene. 1 pair of black sneakers with orange laces, not belonging to Kendrick, had blood on them. These were not processed as evidence, though.
I'm sorry, what?
Yes, because they just, when the investigators saw it, they were like, oh, it doesn't seem like it pertains to this case. I agree.
Anything in that area, the whole area should have been taped off.
A lot of people, like, listen, I was going in such a deep dive about this case. I was watching so many like news videos, interviews and everything, and so many other investigators were like, everything should have been tested, bagged, taken.
You watch, I feel like every case that we've ever covered, there's even down to the tiny pieces of shards of glass that are broken.
Yeah.
That could potentially have DNA.
Which,
you don't touch anything.
Which again leads to the fact of, it seems like they walked in and they're like, oh, I'm just going to assume that it was an accident, and this probably has nothing to do with that. Because I think they were just so focused on the fact that they were like, no, this has to be an accident. And that it is what it is, right? Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So another pair of tennis shoes were found, but also were not collected as potential evidence, even though they didn't have anything to do with it. And then Kendrick's own sneakers, which he had 2 pairs in the gym, okay? The pairs in which one of the shoes that was found under his head, the black shoe with the white stripe, the one that the sheriff states they believe that he was trying to reach for.
Yes.
And then he had the second pair, the gray, white, orange colored ones that you're talking about in that photo. Correct.
Which, I'm sorry, but based on that photo, those look placed there.
Mm-hmm. And these shoes were the ones that his mom even stated, like, these are the shoes that he always changed into for gym. But those shoes were found, like you said, on top of him, thrown behind him inside the mat. So if he was laying upside down vertically, how the hell would those second pairs of shoes land on top of him?
Yeah.
And we're talking like he's in a tube, okay, guys? Like he's in a tunnel. Like imagine a rolled up mat and then there's like some hole left in its cylinder. He's in there upside down. So how is it that these pairs of shoes end up on top by his feet?
And they also look like high tops too. So even if he started trying to like say that he did go in here and get stuck somehow, if he started kicking his feet, they're high tops. They're not going to come off as easy.
Yeah. Which I even thought about the other one too. Like if he had, it just doesn't make sense. It's just weird. It's interesting. So, and clearly with the lack of proper evidence collection and testing, we don't have many answers about what the hell these shoes have anything to do, because they were just so committed and convinced that they were like, no, it was an accident. It had to be an accident, right? At the scene, the police reports state that there was a hoodie. That's like gray Hollister hoodie, and a yellow folder and a textbook. Now, we know that the yellow folder and the textbook were Kendrick's, because later on there's going to be CCTV footage and he's holding the yellow folder. The hoodie, though, seemed to have apparent bloodstains at the wrists of the hoodie, and it was found at the scene. But again, it was not collected or tested as evidence.
Why?
Yeah. And the investigator goes on the news and says, we don't believe that it had anything to do with the case at this time. But again, doesn't matter. This is a crime scene. Why would you not just tag it, process it for evidence, see if it is blood, and then be like, okay, no, we can rule that out. There's like nothing you can say in this moment to be like, oh yeah, well that definitely can't be. We don't know anymore. I know. So Kendrick's body and positioning. Right? We know that Kendrick's body was found inside the rolled up mat, upside down, so he was vertical, and there are reports of vomit and blood present that were pooled by his head. Now, his leg apparently was reportedly a little bit twisted, which seems difficult to explain given how tight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the space within the mat. Like, he's literally, like, cased in there. Now, like I said before, students reports that they would sometimes leave their shoes or belongings in the rolled up mats and retrieve them later by tilting the mats over, though, never jumping in. So this obviously raises a question about why would Kendrick climb into the mat if this is something that he's done before, which is climbing into the mat would make it much more difficult and clearly potentially more dangerous to do so. And the fact that the mat is deeper by some inches than his height just kind of adds to confusion, right?
Yeah. And I will say too, even if he went head first, his hands, obviously his arms are going to be...
He has one arm over him. Yeah.
Just knowing enough about these mats and how much they weigh and how easy you can tip them over. Now, this is a lot wider rolled because he's in it. And
which again, we know that he was unrolled and then rolled again. So I don't know, it could have been tighter, but then that doesn't make it any better.
I know.
Yeah.
But even then, if he had an arm above him, he looked strong enough. He could have easily also pushed and been able to push the mat to where at least he could rock it or something. Like,
I mean, he was an athletic boy. Like No, I completely get what you're saying.
There's a lot of things I just don't believe. To me, the minute I see this, I'm not thinking accident at all.
Well, and that's what I mean. Like, let's say he's in, right? Let's just entertain the idea, right? He goes in, he's like, oh, my shoe fell. I'm going to grab my shoe from over instead of just tilting it over. He goes in to tilt his shoe. How did his other shoe end up on the other side of the, ways away?
Way far away.
Yeah. And then even if you were to tell me, let's say he goes in and he actually grabbed, let's say both of his shoes were in and he actually grabbed one. There's no way he could have grabbed one shoe with how tight it is in there and like tossed it behind him over outside of the mat and then chucked it that far away.
Unless he fully came out of the mat, threw it, then went back in.
Right. And to me,
and
I'm
even
like,
that doesn't make sense.
Right. Because it's like, why wouldn't you that would just be so much harder. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
It just doesn't make sense. And again, with how light these mats are, he's a basketball player, football player. Mm-hmm. To me, it just doesn't make sense. Anyone that's athletic and on top of it, you're not young.
Yeah.
So he's not stupid. Everyone in the school said, we just tilt it and grab it.
Everybody does it.
Yeah, because it's easy. They're light.
And this is that's obvious, right? Now, the medical examiner, like we said, theorized that he entered the mat head first to retrieve his shoes, and that's how he became trapped. Now, Detective Mitch Krettel is a homicide detective that's involved in the U.S. Attorney's Office investigation. He stated that the medical examiner's rulings should always be based on facts, not theories, and that if there weren't enough facts to determine a cause of death, then the cause of death should remain undetermined, right? Which I'm like, yes, that obviously makes sense because
100 makes sense.
Yeah, like what this is I have hypothesis off of something that I'm just looking at. That's what the medical examiner that examined Kendrick did, not based on facts, but based on theories. Well, seemed like he got stuck.
An accident.
Yeah. And he even states, like in the documentary too, because he's on there, and some articles that I was reading, that he even states that he's never seen that, and over his whole career, he's never met a medical examiner that was like, oh yeah, I came to this conclusion because of a theory. He said it's always facts. And again, if they don't have enough facts, then they would just rule it as undetermined. Yeah, it's not a problem.
That's the whole point of your job, is to literally be able to figure out, based on facts, what the actual cause of death is.
Exactly. And clearly in this case, it was just a theory. So the next thing I have to mention, and we're still on 2. This is the last bullet point that I want to talk about on the second key factors of what we find at the crime scene. Blood was found on the gym walls about 50 feet away from where Kendrick's body was found. Now, the gym, huge. You're right. Everybody's thinking about a gymnasium. Is literally how it looks like. It's huge. Yeah. The sheriff's office confirmed that it was blood on the wall, but stated that they didn't believe it was Kendrick's. And so they did not pursue further investigation or test it. I know. It's like they weren't doing their job that day.
And I was going to say, and I hate
saying that, I know.
When we have these types of cases where I feel like I don't want to say that I'm putting blame, but at the same time, to me, this has been so poorly handled.
Already? Yeah.
Because at that point, even if it's blood because even I know like my gymnasium that I grew up with for middle school and high school, our gymnasium had blood in certain areas and it was dried and...
It's a gym. Some kids might bleed. Yeah. Nose bleeds.
And it didn't always get cleaned up as fast as you would expect. But at the same time,
this is a crime scene.
If you're in a crime scene, I don't care if you think it's old blood or just blood that's not relevant. You test everything.
Yeah. Everything has to be bagged. Everything should be processed. I completely agree. And a lot of other professionals and investigators agree with the same things because of all the articles and the investigations that all the research that I was doing. It was insane. And so there are reportedly about 6 impact sites of blood found on the walls. Okay. Oh. Yeah. But again,
not relevant.
They literally, he was like, it doesn't seem relevant to the case. They don't believe that it's relevant to the case. Yeah. Now, moving on to 3. Okay. Where we're jumping into CCTV footage and FBI involvement. Now, you can go ahead. 2 key pieces of evidence, right? Because that's what they believe. That's the blood on the walls. Now, later, the FBI became involved in the investigation, and not too long later, but, I'm talking about, it wasn't the same day. They became involved in the investigation, and they seized the school's CCTV hard drives for cameras and stuff, okay? Now, there are significant gaps and inconsistencies in the CCTV footage from the gym.
Oh.
Yes, CNN actually got their hands on the footage early on and hired a forensic video analyst called Grant Fredericks, okay, so he could review them. He states that they're not original files and that they've been altered in image quality and drop information, and that there were quite a number of files that were corrupted and just couldn't be played. So again, I'm like, Right. I immediately was like, okay, what is going on here? This is interesting. But then a part of me was also like, okay, I've seen high schools. They're not really good at keeping or understanding this type of tech, but I completely get where you're going.
I'm just saying they aren't, but at the same time,
there's no way you can't just take. I know there's no way you can't. They're not asking you to edit this in like
I got punched
Adobe
in the
Premiere
face my freshman year and got to watch it back on the recording.
No, I agree.
On the camera.
No, I'm sorry to hear that, baby.
It's okay.
F you, whoever did that to him. But yes, no, I completely agreed. Because to me, I'm like, there's no way you don't know about footage. And that's why, like, when I was thinking about this case, I'm like, okay, but still, though, that doesn't make sense. Like, it's weird. It's odd, right?
Very.
So there was also an hour and 5 minutes of footage that is missing. Can you guess what hour and a half? What hour and 5 minutes?
Right after 12. What was it? 12:40, 12:30,
12:20, around there. Yep. We'll get more into some of the timestamps, but the timestamps on the footage were also reported to be inaccurate. So let's say if someone was like walking around at 10 a.m. down the hall, and like that's one camera angle, and then by the way, there's like tons of camera angles in the school. There's one camera angle, and they're walking down the hall like at 10 a.m. and then another camera angle down the hall. So we're still kind of looking at the same person.
Yeah,
they'd really be walking around like 9:40. So the timestamps are off. Yeah. They're not even, and it's just this day.
Which two? Oh, it's just this day. Oh, never mind. That just destroyed that one. I was going to say, well, I mean, to be fair, maybe the camera's off. But,
I know.
That went to shit.
I think the same way. That's what I mean. Like when I'm researching these cases, which I remember I heard about Kendrick Johnson's case like years ago. And I was like thinking about him recently for some reason. I think he came. Oh, you know what it was? I was watching a TikTok video and some kid, it was doing like a funny TikTok, but he was standing on one of these mats and he did like a joke like with his friends and he slid right in it. And obviously, but in that moment I was like, oh my God, it reminded me of Kendrick Johnson. Like, and immediately I was like, oh, I remember that kid, Kendrick Johnson, who was like suffocated in a mat. And it was funny, I opened up the comments. People were like, oh my God, you scared me. This reminds me of poor Kendrick Johnson. What happened to him? Yada other stuff. So I was like, OMG. Okay. So the school claimed malfunctions in the camera system, of course. And even though their motion cameras picked up everything else, they just didn't pick up the moment that Kendrick was kind of in that frame. Okay. So they have tons of camera angles. Okay. There are 4 cameras in that gymnasium.
Oh, so they even have cameras
in the
gym.
Gymnasium. Oh. Yes, they have cameras in the gym.
You know,
Tom is so over it.
I already dealt with the Fox Hollow Farms, and that whole entire. If you haven't listened to the episode, go back and listen.
Yes,
part 1 and 2. But going through that, I cussed a lot.
I know, we were very frustrated with that.
And this case is getting me just as frustrated.
I know.
And this is,
we promised we wouldn't cuss so much.
Getting in a podcast with you, I didn't know that we were going to get into cases and like there were going to be so many episodes that were just going to get me so triggered.
I know. And remember I told you, why do you think that sometimes you're like, well, I don't think so. And I'm like, you'd be surprised. Like this happens to people every day. There's crazier cases. This is one of them. We've covered a lot of them already. It's just sad. I mean, cases, stories, paranormal phenomena. There's a lot of things that are just mystery and unexplained, and it just don't make sense, and they're unsolved and cold. And I know.
It's crazy.
I know. So they have 4 cameras in this gym, and they capture him going into the gym, but the only angle that it doesn't capture is that corner.
Oh, well,
I know, what
convenient.
A coincidence. I know, very convenient. Now, the autopsy done by the county stated that they believe that he died falling head first, right? And their report didn't mention of any significant injuries, just that he died because he couldn't breathe. Okay.
Makes sense.
Right. Now, the Johnson family couldn't believe that, especially seeing how brutal he looked, how swollen, and he looked beat up, right? Something just didn't sit right with them. And honestly, who would blame them? Because...
I mean, seeing the visual, it makes you wonder immediately that something... Anyways.
I understand your frustration, trust me.
I get why the autopsy people were like, oh yeah, it was just nothing.
Right. Oh, and a part of me feels a little like they're just sweeping it under the rug.
Yes.
Which kind of goes into play to...
Or sweeping it into the mat. All they did was rolled it back
straight up,
put it right back up, and acted...
I know. Which we're gonna get into it too, because we'll start talking a little bit more too. It also even makes people wonder. Everybody wonders too, but it makes you wonder: is it because he's black? Is it just because they're not really paying attention?
Yeah.
Are they just seeing this as another statistic? Like, whatever, it is what it is. And so, but it's hard not to think about that, especially knowing, the area, the history, but also knowing that there's corruption sometimes.
Yeah.
Now, there's also accounts too that there's certain things that the autopsy report didn't write down, because one of the things I just want to mention really quickly is that when the paramedics showed up, they actually, in their notes, they stated that he had like a small bruise on his chin, and that wasn't reflected on the autopsy report, which again, on the autopsy report, it should show everything. It should show everything. So but that was just something. It was
an accident, so
right.
Whatever.
And I remember reading something saying that, well, if he has bruising, it could just be the lividity, I think it was the name of it, because he was laying and there was probably upside blood down. Pooled at certain areas, which causes things that look like bruises. But still, you should still report that, right? There was nothing like that reported on the autopsy report. Now, so after that first autopsy, Kendrick's family had this feeling that something wasn't right. They decided they needed a second opinion. So they brought in Dr. William R. Anderson. He's an MD. He's a forensic pathology. Basically, he's someone who specializes in figuring out how people died, right? Yeah. And he's really respected in his field. He's been doing this for over 40 years. And they asked him to do a fresh look at Kendrick. So one of the first things that Dr. Anderson zeroed in on was Kendrick's lungs. The official, he's looking at the autopsy report, okay? The official autopsy report says that Kendrick died from positional asphyxia, which is saying that he suffocated because his body's position. But here's the thing. Dr. Anderson said, wait a minute, if that were true, then his lungs wouldn't look like this. And he explained that when someone suffocates like that, their lungs are working really hard to breathe for a long time. Eventually, their muscles get exhausted, their hearts start to fail, and fluid starts to build up in their lungs. Basically, their lungs get really heavy.
Yeah.
Okay. And Dr. Anderson knew right away that Kendrick's lungs didn't fit that picture, because the original autopsy report listed the weight of his lungs, and they were totally normal. They were within total normal range.
Really?
Yeah. He even said in an interview that if the lungs aren't heavy, you can't just say it was positional asphyxia. Like if that's not what the lungs showed, then that's not what you can rule it to be, right? Which means that something else obviously had to have happened to cause his death, because that just doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, you need to follow the facts, you need to follow the science, and that's what it's telling you, and you can't just rule that out as positional asphyxiation. This clearly was a huge red flag, and it's what made the Johnsons family decide to have his body exhumed.
Oh.
Yes. They needed to know for sure, so they asked for a second and totally independent autopsy. Now, if you think about it, this comes out of their pocket. Okay,
yeah,
this isn't,
But again, I would do the same thing.
No, 100% I would have done that. Yeah, and if I got a second opinion, they're like, why would they rule that? That doesn't make any sense from their findings, right? So when Dr. Anderson's team opened up Kendrick's body for the second autopsy, they were met with something pretty horrifying. And that's where we're going to end today. I know I'm doing it again. I'm leaving you on a cliffhanger.
You're joking. I'm sorry, but the people are going to be upset that this is another two-parter.
I know, but I can't help it because I go in such a deep dive and I want to make sure you guys get as many details as you can. This is definitely going to be a two-parter. I know. Surprise.
Already the amount of information that this whole first part has had.
I know. I'm sorry to do it to you. I'm sorry to do it to everybody. I really am. But stay tuned. Come back next week.
Come back next week.
I think Tom's going to be very upset with me. Very melancholy this whole week. Until the next Monday.
Because I clicked the next on my slideshow and then all of a sudden it just showed end of slideshow. And I was like, no, there's no way.
I know. But it's okay. It's all going to work out. And you're going to find out the rest of the answers next week. So don't worry about it. So everybody come back in and stay tuned, okay? Thank you for joining us today on Macabre Mondays. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts.
Even though we make you guys wait for a two-parter, in between, definitely send us your thoughts and your episodes that you want us to cover. If you have a story that's strange, sinister, or just absolutely downright spooky, no matter how small you think it is, because it's not as small as you think it might be, send it our way. You can email us these at macabreMondayspodcast@gmail.com or jump over to our website, macabremondays.com, to submit your story. Yours just might be featured in an upcoming listener episode.
Follow us on social media by searching Macabre Mondays for photos of today's episodes, updates, and a little extra spooky fun. We'll see you next Monday for the two-parter of this episode. And for more sinister, strange, and spooky fun. Stay tuned, more mystery is just around the corner. Until then, stay curious and stay safe. Please come back for part 2. I swear, I won't do this all the time.
I'll be there. So if anything, just come back for me because I'll be ready.
Sounds good. Have a great time, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the sources that helped me piece together the incredibly complex story today. It's important to remember that this case is still unfolding and there are many different perspectives. A lot of the detailed information about the autopsy findings, the interviews with Dr. William R. Anderson, and the analysis of lung weights came from the Tubi documentary, simply titled Kendrick Johnson Case. It's a really in-depth look at the forensic evidence, and I highly recommend checking it out if you want to dive deeper. For the information about the Bell brothers, the missing camera footages, the FBI involvement, and the various legal proceedings, I relied on a combination of news reports from outlets like WJCL News, CNN News, and various investigative reports. Information regarding the court documents came from publicly accessible legal databases. Also, the Valdosta Daily Times provided crucial local coverage, as well as websites like All That's Interesting and Stanford University's Say Their Names exhibit. You can find more information on the website. I'll break all the sources down there. I also used YouTube channels like Fatal Breakdown and Truly Criminal, whose video, The Tragic and Mysterious Death of Kendrick Johnson, 2020 update in the description box, provided a great timeline of events and points of interest. Footage of videos were also used from CNN's news coverage on YouTube. I'll also post that into our website. The historical context about J. Edgar Hoover and COINTELPRO came from a range of historical texts and documentaries, including materials from the FBI's own archives and an independent historical analysis of the time period, such as The Age of Surveillance by Frank J. Donner, Official and Confidential, The Secret Life of J. Edgar Hoover by Anthony Summers, and The Gospel of J. Edgar Hoover by Leroy Martin. And of course, many interviews from news outlets and documentaries were used to gather all the information of this episode. It's crucial to acknowledge that this case is incredibly sensitive and there are still many unanswered questions. I've tried my very best to present the facts as accurately as possible, but I also want to acknowledge that there are different interpretations of the evidence. I encourage you to do your own research and form your own conclusions. And as always, I will include a detailed list of sources in the show notes.